It happened at my cousin Riley's engagement party. A warm spring afternoon, white tent strung with lights, folding chairs in neat rows across the backyard. People milled about holding champagne flutes, laughing politely, plates balanced on their laps. I was seated near the hydrangeas, my crutches leaning against the chair, one leg crossed over where the other used to be. I'd gotten good at looking composed. Jessica didn't know I was behind the lattice screen near the patio table when she said it. She was laughing, wine glass in hand, surrounded by a cluster of second cousins and college friends. Her voice dropped just enough to sound conspiratorial, but not enough to keep me from hearing it. I mean, I get that she went through something, she said with a theatrical sigh, but does she have to act like she's the only person who's ever had a hard time? It's a little much. There were nervous laughs, but she wasn't finished. She limps into every room like it's a funeral, always talking about pain management and how hard everything is now. I swear, it's like she wants people to feel sorry for her. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like I'd been shoved backward. Someone mumbled something, probably trying to steer her away, but Jessica only shrugged and added with a smirk, "I'm just saying, not everything's about her. Some people fake drama because they miss attention." The air shifted. Even the wind felt colder. I didn't react. I stayed behind the screen, blinked until the sting in my eyes faded, and waited until she walked away. When I returned to my seat, I smiled at my aunt, complimented the caterer's tiny shrimp toasts, and asked Riley when the honeymoon was. No one saw anything crack, but inside, I was unraveling. Jessica had always been a little cruel, a little careless with words, but this felt different. It wasn't just unkind, it was calculated, and she said it like it was truth, as if my trauma was a performance, and she was the only one willing to say what everyone else was thinking. She didn't know I'd hurt her, not yet. The accident happened on a Tuesday. It was raining, one of those endless gray drizzles that makes the road look slick with glass. A delivery truck ran a red light. I remember the sound before the impact. Metal screeching, a horn too late, the way my coffee cup flew out of the holder in slow motion. Then nothing. I woke up in a white room with soft beeping and a hollow ache where my leg used to be. The doctor's voice was kind but clinical. Complications, internal bleeding. They had to remove it to save my life. Jessica came once. 3 days later, she stood awkwardly by my hospital bed, looking around like the room itself offended her. She stayed exactly 10 minutes, didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't touch my hand. She brought a get well card that wasn't signed and left it on the side table like it might bite her. She never came back. What followed were weeks of surgeries and skin grafts, of physical therapy that made me cry into my pillow at night. I learned how to balance again, how to shift weight with a phantom limb that burned and ached and lied to my brain every second of the day. But the worst part wasn't the pain, it was the silence. I smiled through check-ins and therapy groups, posted optimistic updates on social media so no one would worry. Everyone told me how strong I was, how inspirational. Meanwhile, I showered sitting down, learned to dress while seated on the edge of my bed, and sometimes cried when I couldn't open a stubborn jar of peanut butter. But I didn't tell anyone that. People think trauma ends when you leave the hospital. It doesn't. It becomes a quiet roommate, breathing behind your shoulder, waiting for the wrong comment or the wrong glance to shove you back into the dark. Jessica didn't see any of that. She didn't see the nights I couldn't sleep because the pain shot up through nerves that weren't there anymore. She didn't see the way I stared at my shoes, knowing I'd never wear heels again. What she saw was attention. What she missed was everything else. Growing up, Jessica needed the spotlight like she needed oxygen. If I got a lead role in the school play, she joined the costume crew and told everyone she'd turned it down to give me a chance. If I won an award, she made sure to mention how she almost got one too, but didn't apply because she was too busy helping others. Her generosity always came with disclaimers and invisible asterisks. I didn't fight her for attention. I didn't need to. I was the quiet one, the steady one, the one who didn't mind letting her shine, even if it meant standing just outside the frame. My wins came from working hard, keeping my head down, doing what needed to be done. Hers came from spectacle. Our parents didn't see it. Jessica was loud and charming, all big smiles and dramatic hugs. I was reserved, polite, easier to ignore. When I made the honor roll, my mom would smile and say, "Of course you did." When Jessica passed a single math class, it was cause for balloons. It was always like that. She once borrowed my college application essay, tweaked the name, and submitted it for a scholarship I'd never even heard of. She won, said she wrote it herself, swore it was a coincidence. I let it go. I always let it go. Even when she repeated my stories at parties as if they were hers. Even when she posted old photos from my graduation with captions about her own proud journey. I told myself it didn't matter, that I knew the truth and that was enough. But it's different now. It's not just petty competition or childish insecurity. This is cruelty with purpose, rewriting my pain as performance, dismissing something I've fought tooth and nail to live through. She's not trying to win anymore. She's trying to erase me. I used to think letting her win was the kindest thing I could do, that giving her space would somehow fill the holes she refused to admit were there. But now I see what I should have seen years ago. Jessica never wanted to share the light. She wanted it all to herself. It started with a meme, a cartoon of a woman in a wheelchair holding up traffic while people rolled their eyes. The caption read, "We get it. You're different." Jessica didn't post it. She liked it. That quiet, seemingly harmless digital tap of approval. But I saw it, and I felt it. Then came the Instagram story, a reposted quote about some people pretending to be victims for validation, another like, then a comment on someone else's post about toxic attention seeking, where she simply added a laughing emoji. It wasn't directed at me by name. It didn't need to be. The people who knew us, who knew what I'd been through, noticed. Friends messaged me privately. "Is Jessica okay? Was that about you?" One even asked if I wanted her to say something. I told them no. I wasn't ready to start a war I hadn't chosen. But the hardest part was when she tagged me. A video of a TikToker dramatically throwing themselves on a bed, fake crying to sad music. The caption, "When someone says their phantom pain is acting up again," she added, "Yolivia can relate." I stared at it for a full minute, unsure if I'd hallucinated it. Then I read it again and again. My stomach twisted into knots so tight it felt like I couldn't breathe. Phantom pain wasn't a joke. It was a screaming, invisible knife I woke up with most nights. It stole sleep, broke my focus, made me flinch from things no one else could see, and she made it into a punchline. For clout. For a laugh. When I didn't respond, she deleted the post. Not out of guilt, out of cowardice. But the damage was done. People had seen it, and so had I. I realized something then. She wasn't just uncomfortable with my trauma, she resented it. She couldn't stand that for once I was being seen, that people were listening to me, that I had a story bigger than hers, and one she couldn't steal. So she decided to rewrite it instead. One like, one laugh, one perfectly placed jab at a time. The event was called Limitless, a sleek, upscale fundraiser for disability advocacy hosted at the Downtown Gallery. High ceilings, minimalist art, low hum of polite conversation over jazz. I was one of the featured speakers. My topic, visibility without pity, dignity without compromise. I wore a tailored black dress that hit just below the knee, the hem sweeping neatly above the prosthetic. I no longer tried to hide it. Jessica was there as someone's plus one. She hadn't told me she was coming. She never did. I was speaking with the event organizer near the refreshment table when I heard her voice, unmistakable even in a crowd. She was standing a few feet away, wine glass in hand, leaned in close to a woman I didn't recognize. "I swear," she said, loud enough to be heard by half the room. "Olivia plays the amputation card like a violin. Every time someone claps, I wonder if they're applauding her speech or just feel bad she only has one leg." The woman gave a shocked laugh, the kind that isn't sure if something's funny or just uncomfortable. Jessica grinned like she'd just said the wittiest thing in the world. "She milks it for sympathy," she added. "I mean, come on. People lose limbs every day. Doesn't mean they need a standing ovation every time they enter a room." The blood drained from my face. I felt like I was underwater. Sound muffled, motion slow. A few heads turned. One person caught my eye with an apologetic expression. The kind you give when you've witnessed something awful and don't know how to undo it. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I simply turned, excused myself from the organizer, and walked outside into the cool night air. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. But something inside me settled into place. Something cold and sharp and very, very clear. She had finally said it out loud, and people had heard. This wasn't jealousy anymore. It was cruelty, and cruelty left evidence. She didn't know it yet, but I was done letting it slide. The next morning, I created a folder on my desktop. I called it J Archive, short, simple, nondescript. Inside it, I placed the first file, a voice memo recorded the night before. Her voice was unmistakable in the background of someone else's video. I trimmed the clip, cleaned the audio, and saved it. Then I began digging. Screenshots of her likes on posts mocking disabled creators. Saved stories she forgot could be seen. Comments that weren't direct but dripped with implication. The kind that let her play innocent while planting poison. I'd kept receipts before. I just hadn't organized them. Now I did, meticulously. Dated, labeled, categorized. My friend Naomi, a media attorney, met me for coffee that week. She'd worked with public figures before, influencers, writers, people who'd faced defamation cloaked in casual cruelty. I told her everything, the comments, the posts, the event. She listened, silent but focused. "Can you prove damages?" she asked softly. I hesitated. "Not yet." "Then build your case. Be thorough. Be quiet. No warning shots." It wasn't about suing, not yet, but it was about leverage, about protecting myself, about knowing that when the moment came, I'd have everything in order. I started documenting conversations, not just with Jessica, but with mutual acquaintances. I paid attention to shifts, the way someone who used to chat freely with me now avoided eye contact, the way two colleagues I'd once mentored suddenly left me off a panel. Jessica wasn't just mocking me. She was undermining me. Subtly but intentionally, her words were starting to land in places that could bruise more than feelings. I didn't confront her. I didn't flinch. Instead, I played her game better than she ever could. Quiet, strategic, and visible. She wanted attention. She'd get it, just not the kind she'd expected. It was Naomi who told me. She forwarded the email with a simple subject line, "You'll love this." Attached was a forwarded message from her friend in HR at Corey Collective, a rising star in the inclusive fashion world. They'd just received an application for a mid-level PR position from Jessica Monroe. Jessica, my sister, the same one who joked about my prosthetic at a disability fundraiser. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so grotesque. Corey Collective was a brand built on real inclusion. Their campaigns featured models with visible and invisible disabilities. Their founder used a wheelchair. Their message was clear. Representation isn't a trend, it's a standard. And me, I was already in advanced talks with them for a brand ambassadorship, possibly more. I'd met their creative director at a speaking engagement 3 months ago. We hit it off immediately. She'd followed my advocacy work, loved my authenticity, and wanted someone who could represent more than a product. She wanted a story that mattered. I hadn't signed anything yet, but we were close. So close that when Naomi told me about Jessica's application, I didn't even have to ask what came next. "She doesn't know," Naomi said, smirking over the rim of her coffee mug. Not yet, anyway. I didn't respond, just sipped my tea and let the weight of poetic symmetry settle into my bones. Jessica had spent months trying to discredit me, and now, without even realizing it, she was walking directly into a room that already had my name on the walls. Of course I didn't tell her. Why would I? Some lessons need to be learned the hard way, especially when you've built a career on tearing someone else's down. Let her show up confident. Let her walk in thinking she owns the room. Let her underestimate me one final time. The invitation arrived in my inbox 3 days later. Subject: Guest panelist confirmation. Corey Collective Values Roundtable. Time: 11 a.m. Location: Corey HQ Conference Room. B. Attire: business casual, bold spirit optional. I smiled. The irony hadn't worn off. Jessica's interview was scheduled for the same day, same time, same conference room. She'd be participating in a panel discussion, part of Corey's unique hiring process. They like to see candidates engage in real conversations about the brand's mission, inclusion, authenticity, and storytelling. Every applicant received the same outline. None knew who would be on the panel until they walked in. I arrived early, dressed in navy trousers and a crisp blouse, prosthetic polished to a gleam, notes folded neatly in my bag. Not because I needed them, but because presentation still mattered. The head of people and culture greeted me with a warm hug. "We're thrilled to have you here," she whispered. "Let's shake things up." At 10:59 a.m., the door opened. Jessica walked in, clipboard in hand, heels clicking like punctuation marks. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy scanning the room, wearing the face she saved for optics. Concerned, professional, deeply invested in whatever cause was trending this month. And then she saw me. Her mouth froze mid-smile. The blood drained from her face in real time. She blinked like maybe I was a mirage. "Olivia," she managed. I nodded. "Good morning." She sat in silence for the rest of the session. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't look at her, not even once. I spoke about gaslighting in advocacy spaces, about how some voices get erased the moment they become inconvenient, about how proximity to struggle doesn't equal understanding, especially when that proximity is used to manipulate, to discredit, or to take up space that isn't yours. I talked about the cost of being doubted, of being told your pain is performative, of hearing your own story repeated through someone else's mouth, rewritten, distorted, minimized. I didn't name her. I didn't have to. By the time the session ended, Jessica couldn't meet anyone's eyes. And Corey Collective? They invited me to stay for a private meeting afterward. Jessica, they thanked for her time. It didn't take long. By the end of the week, word had spread. Not just through the company, but far beyond it. Corey Collective sent a polite, carefully worded email thanking Jessica for her interest, but moving forward with other candidates. They didn't elaborate. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. But outside of corporate HR language, the real conversations were already happening. A former colleague from her last agency tweeted, "Wild how the loudest voices about inclusion are often the quickest to mock it behind closed doors." No names, just context, and the replies filled in the blanks. A mutual friend texted me that someone from Jessica's Pilates group had brought up the event. "She told that leg joke out loud," they'd asked, like, in a room full of people. Others began reaching out privately, small messages, quiet apologies. "I'm so sorry I laughed when she said that thing at Riley's party. I didn't realize how deep it went. She said you were overreacting, but I've seen the screenshots now. I had no idea she was doing all that online." The tide shifted. Even the people who'd once smiled politely through her barbed comments started pulling away. Her curated world of performative empathy and strategic charm was cracking. And this time, there was no one left to hold it together for her. Jessica didn't take the rejection quietly. She told friends it was all politics, that the company had already made up their minds, that she was too outspoken for them. But those excuses only held for a few days. Because when the videos surfaced, short clips from the Corey panel shared by attendees with captions like, "Whew, this hit hard," the message became unavoidable. Someone in the room had captured my speech. Just the right moment, just the right words. It went viral in a quiet, aching way. No names, just impact. And for once, Jessica wasn't the one in the spotlight. She was the shadow cast behind it. She started with the group chat, the one we shared with our cousins, a few childhood friends, and people she never thought would question her. She dropped in a message so casual it could have been about weekend plans. Not sure what Olivia's telling everyone, but some people are just really sensitive lately. You say one thing and suddenly you're labeled a monster. I didn't respond. Neither did anyone else, so she escalated. She called Riley, claimed the Corey Collective situation was a misunderstanding, said she was blindsided by my presence, and that her joke, the one about milking sympathy, had been taken out of context. She was just venting, she told him. It wasn't even about Olivia, not really. When that didn't work, she pivoted, played the hurt sister, the misunderstood one. She's always been dramatic. Ever since the accident, everything's about her. I'm not allowed to say anything anymore without being painted as the villain. She messaged a former coworker of mine and implied I'd used my story to manipulate companies into hiring me out of pity, that I was leveraging trauma to get ahead, that she, Jessica, was the real victim of cancel culture, of sibling jealousy, of my need for control. But here's the thing about spin. It only works when people haven't seen the receipts. And I had them all. The posts, the comments, the clip from the fundraiser, her tag on the TikTok about phantom pain, long since deleted, but not before I saved it. Still, I said nothing. No public response, no vague posts, no counter spin, just silence. Let her scramble. Let her try to control the narrative with shaky hands and a house of cards. The truth was already out there, and it didn't need defending, because for the first time in our lives, Jessica was telling her version of the story, and no one was buying it. I posted it on a Tuesday morning, just a link, no caption, no hashtags, no fanfare. The title was simple, "The Cost of Being Disbelieved." I published it on a blog I rarely used, tucked between old essays about adaptive fashion and digital accessibility. But this post was different. It was longer, sharper, and it came from a place I'd never let the public see before. I didn't name Jessica, not once, but anyone who'd been watching closely didn't need the name. I wrote about what it felt like to wake up missing a part of yourself, only to be told you were dramatic. I wrote about the phantom pain, the pitying stares, and the cruel jokes disguised as concern. I described the invisible second trauma, the one that doesn't come from the accident, but from the people who try to rewrite your story while you're still living it. I wrote about the gaslighting, the passive-aggressive comments, the laughs at your expense that echo louder than support ever did. I wrote about being erased in real time, and then I wrote about reclaiming it. The last paragraph was quiet, just a truth I had never said out loud before. I didn't lose my voice when I lost my leg, but I did lose the patience to make other people comfortable with my pain. By lunch, it had 20,000 shares. By evening, I was getting emails from strangers, people thanking me for writing what they were too afraid to say. Disabled veterans, burn survivors, women whose own sisters called them overly sensitive after cancer treatments, a mother whose child was mocked at school for using a walker. They all recognized it. They all knew the cost. Jessica didn't comment publicly, but someone told me she texted a mutual friend, so now she's playing the martyr too. Let her think that, because I wasn't playing anything. I was telling the truth, and this time, the world was finally listening. It was like a door opening. Within days of publishing the letter, I received 3 emails from major brands, one offering a podcast guest spot, another asking if I'd keynote their adaptive design summit, and one that simply read, "We'd love to collaborate. Your story moved us." The blog post had struck a nerve, not just in advocacy spaces, but in boardrooms. People were sharing it in Slack channels, quoting it on LinkedIn, reposting it with the phrase, "this," all of this. By the end of the week, I had interviews lined up with 2 media outlets and an invitation to speak on a panel about authentic storytelling and brand partnerships. The companies didn't want pity. They wanted presence, voice, impact. They wanted the very thing Jessica had tried to smother. I never mentioned her name, not in interviews, not on calls, not even when one journalist asked, carefully, if any part of my story had caused tension with people close to me. I smiled and said, "Not everyone is meant to be part of your healing." Meanwhile, quietly, Jessica's PR roster began thinning. One client pulled their retainer, citing brand alignment concerns. Another postponed a campaign indefinitely. Whispers started circulating about a reputation issue, that she lacked sensitivity, that she'd been involved in some uncomfortable drama. She tried spinning again, posting inspirational quotes about growth and owning your mistakes. But the comments were quiet, the engagement low. People had moved on from her. Not once did I gloat, not even when Naomi sent me a screenshot of a PR forum thread titled, "Who Not to Hire If You Value Inclusion." Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about truth, about visibility, about finally being seen not as a problem to fix or a story to steal, but as a full person, flawed, healing, and powerful in her own name. Jessica had tried to make me smaller, but I hadn't just survived her version of the story. I'd rewritten it, and this time I held the pen. The dinner was at my parents' house, a just us evening, something we hadn't done in a while. Roast chicken, linen napkins, soft music humming from the speakers in the living room. My mother had set the table with her wedding china, as if porcelain could make the air feel less tense. Jessica was already there when I arrived. She barely looked at me as I walked in, just a tight smile and a forced, "Hey." I returned the gesture. Polite, neutral, practiced. We made it through salad and halfway into the main course before it happened. She set down her fork with a soft clink, folded her napkin like she needed something to do with her hands, and said, "I hope you're happy." The room went still. "You've completely destroyed my reputation," she continued, eyes flicking toward our mother, then back to me. "Clients are pulling out. People think I'm some kind of villain. You made me into a pariah." I didn't speak, not right away. "You didn't even name me," she said, voice tightening. "But everyone knows. You've been playing this calculated little game and you're winning. Congratulations." I looked at her for a long moment, and then I spoke. "I didn't have to name you," I said quietly. "Your own words did that." Her mouth opened, but I raised a hand. "I have screenshots of your comments, the videos, the joke at Limitless, the TikTok you tagged me in. Deleted doesn't mean gone." I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table, slim, professional, and very deliberate. Inside were the records, labeled, time-stamped. Jessica stared at it like it might catch fire. "You want to talk about reputations?" I said. "You built yours by trying to dismantle mine. You wanted to be seen as the voice of inclusion while mocking the people who live it. That was your choice. I just stopped letting you choose for me." Silence fell over the table. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. My mother's hands were clenched in her lap. Then, finally, she spoke. "I believe Olivia." Jessica flinched like she'd been slapped. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and left without another word. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I didn't follow. It came at 2:17 a.m., the time of regrets and unraveling, a long, meandering text that lit up my phone with the soft buzz of a past still trying to stay relevant. "I don't know what you want from me, Olivia. Maybe I messed up, but I was hurting too. You never made space for that. I'm sorry for the TikTok thing. That was Stupid. But you've made me into a joke. I can't get work. People treat me like I'm toxic. You turned everyone against me. You got everything, the speaking deals, the press, the sympathy. I just wanted something too. I wanted to matter. You were always the strong one. I was just the extra, the shadow. You never noticed what that felt like. But maybe you're happy now. I hope you are. There was no punctuation in the last few sentences, just a stream of raw, bitter confession. Half apology, half justification, entirely too late. I stared at the screen, the words swimming in the dim light beside my bed. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then I opened my email, attached it to the ongoing folder I shared with Naomi, and hit send. Then I blocked the number, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, out of peace, out of knowing that forgiveness doesn't always require reconciliation, that some chapters end without ceremony, without closure, without mutual understanding. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is leave the apology unopened and write your own ending. Mine was already underway. The lights dimmed as I stepped onto the stage. The ballroom at the Global Disability Empowerment Summit was packed, rows of chairs filled with advocates, innovators, community leaders, and everyday people who had decided to stop apologizing for who they were. I took my place at the podium, the floor beneath me firm, familiar. My prosthetic leg clicked softly as I shifted my weight, the sound no longer strange, just part of me. I adjusted the mic, and then I began. When I lost my leg, people told me I was brave, but I wasn't. A pause. I was angry. I was scared, and then I was invisible. The room stilled. Faces leaned forward, eyes locked in. I expected the pain, the rehabilitation, the physical changes. What I didn't expect was the disbelief, the quiet comments, the polite doubts, the whispers that maybe I was exaggerating or using my story for attention, that maybe I was the problem. I scanned the audience, letting the moment settle. It wasn't losing a limb that almost broke me. It was being doubted by the people I thought I could trust. No names, no need. But I rose anyway. I chose not to disappear. I chose to speak, even when my voice shook. And eventually, people listened. A wave of warmth swept through the room, unspoken but felt. I don't share this for sympathy. I share it for the woman sitting in the third row who's been told she's too much, for the man in the back whose accessibility request was labeled inconvenient, for every single person who's had to defend the reality of their own experience. I stepped away from the podium, my voice clear and steady now. You don't have to shrink to make others comfortable. You don't have to be silent to be respected. You don't have to be whole to be powerful. A standing ovation followed, not just polite applause, real recognition. It wasn't about what I'd lost anymore. It was about what I'd found. Clarity, strength, self. Later, alone in the green room, I took out my phone, not to check messages, just to glance at the lock screen, an old reminder I hadn't yet deleted. Jessica's final text, still saved in the archive. You got everything. I just wanted to matter. And somehow I didn't feel anger or pity, just peace. Because I did matter. Not because I was loud, not because I was broken, but because I chose to stand tall, even without a leg. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.